Hello, I am Alethea Rollins, a professor at the University of Central Missouri, and I will be sharing a little bit with you about talking about race with your children. It is time to start talking openly about race. Ready or not, it is imperative that parents talk about race with their children. For many years, it has been a taboo topic, and mostly only minority parents have been talking to their children about race. But in the US context, race impacts every aspect of society. Researchers and historians both agree we should all be talking about race. If we want to understand our past and change our future, we have to get comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. Since March, we have found ourselves in the perfect storm. Due to COVID and the increased attention on social justice issue and the increasingly divisive political climate, our children are exposed to more information than at any other time. They are home more, they're watching the news, they're viewing social media, they're overhearing adult conversations, they're seeing signs and observing political battles, and some are even participating in protests. And this perfect storm has the ingredients for us to have really important and impactful conversations with our children. But first, let's get on the same page about race in this country. Race is a social construct that did not come about until the 1500s. There is no genetic or biological basis in how we have created racial groups. It evolved out of an economic necessity. Slavery predates race, so we needed a way to keep enslaved people enslaved, and so we created racial groups and in order to keep those slaves in place so that we could continue our economic growth. Skin color is only skin deep. There is more variation within a group than there are actually between groups. Again, race isn't biological, but it is absolutely real and it is absolutely impactful in many, many ways in our society. Lastly, colorblindness will not end racism. And I know that colorblindness is an often popular way of looking at race among people who do not believe that racism or discrimination is a part of their lives. However, when we choose to be colorblind, we don't see people for who they really are, and we cannot be supportive of people and love people for who they are when we cannot see them. So before talking about race, it's really important that we reflect on our personal experiences with race, racism, and discrimination, our experiences with prejudice, evaluating our racial identity, our beliefs, our personal values. It's important for us to consider, am I comfortable talking about race? How do I feel? What kinds of conversations do I have? And really, you should expect that as you go through this reflection and as you have these conversations, you can expect that there be some discomfort. There may be some dissonance or ambiguity. You may find yourself judging yourself and your reactions or responses. But maybe you'll also find that you have an increased curiosity about things. And all of these are normal and expected and a part of the process. And so really, I just want to encourage you to go through this self-reflection before you begin to have these conversations, and also as you continue to have these conversations, because it's not something you go and you learn and then you're prepared to have conversations. You continue to grow and develop over time. One of the biggest reasons that parents report not talking about race with their children is their age. My child's too young. They don't understand. They don't see color. We hear this a lot. But we know from research that young children are prone to in-group favoritism. So they favor people who are similar to them. Naturally, young children categorize things. And they are not colorblind. They see differences, they categorize things, right? So they can tell when things are different and when things are similar. Attitudes are forming. They're really amenable at a young age. So it's a great time to kind of help them process and develop attitudes. We do know that there's lots of research that says children as young as 3 to 5 are already forming biases against certain groups. So it's really important that we have these conversations. If we don't talk to them, who are they talking to? Where are they getting their information about race? They are seeking to categorize. They are seeking to favorite people who are similar to them. They are forming biases. And so it's really important that as parents, we step in and have these conversations. As we start to think about what kinds of conversations or questions or comments we will give in our conversations about race, we have to remember these conversations must be developmentally appropriate. And I coined the term crayon conversations because you have to meet children where they are. And young children are coloring and categorizing what they know. And they typically use crayon colors and food to talk about how they categorize things. So children don't use racial and ethnic terminology. They don't know the words Black and Latinx unless they've heard it somewhere or unless someone has given them this terminology. They usually describe skin color as peach or yellow or vanilla or chocolate. Children are developing a sense of self and exploring similarities and differences between themselves and others. Who facilitates children understanding of racial and ethnic differences and similarities? Parents, teachers, peers, extended family, social media, what they watch, what they consume, what they read. And how does this happen? By encouraging children to explore their own and other physical characteristics, providing children with accurate, developmentally appropriate information, facilitating children's development of racial pride, helping children develop respect for and comfort with physical differences, and increasing children's awareness of shared human physical characteristics. As children observe variations and begin classifying themselves and others, parents must be prepared to respond spontaneously to curious questions and natural observations, as well as provide direct learning experiences for children to explore their racial awareness and to counter their budding biases and racial misconceptions. Let's be clear, I'm not talking about Black History Month celebrations. This is about talking about race and diversity in a real way on a daily basis during our normal everyday interactions. It is not only about a museum visit or watching a diverse cartoon. It is about pulling race in as often as it is appropriate and responding to race when it comes up. It is not enough to passively provide brown baby dolls and Black Panther action figures. We have to have direct conversations with children about what and who we spend time with, why we choose a brown doll, and what we think is beautiful. We have to engage children in conversations about diverse books, not just simply read them or have them available for children. Instead of just playing diverse musicians, we should be dancing to the music and commenting on how skillfully it was made and how much we love it. And we should shop in diverse businesses and choose diverse contexts. And we have to think about what messages we send unconsciously or passively and what we want and need to say to children directly. We cannot passively let our children's racial awareness develop on its own. We have to guide them and engage them in critical thinking to help them negotiate the information they are receiving. Race and racial terminology is everywhere. Media uses racial terminology and perpetuates racial stereotypes more than we think. We as adults, we've become desensitized to race. But as we begin to think about talking to preschoolers about race, we have to become more consciously aware of the racial messages around us. And those messages we are sending as well. So what do we hope to accomplish? We want to encourage children to ask about their own and others' physical characteristics. We want to provide children with accurate, developmentally appropriate information. We want to enable children to feel pride in themselves, but not superiority over others. We want to enable children to develop ease with and respect for physical differences. Remember, it's okay to see differences. And we want to help children become aware of our shared characteristics. What makes us human? We have way more similarities than we have differences. I spent a lot of time talking about preschool children because parents of young children are most likely to avoid conversations about race. But we can apply this same thinking to discussions with older children. Elementary children are experiencing lots of growth and development and are beginning to develop their sense of self. They are now more capable of having nuanced conversations about race, but require direct teaching to help them understand terminology, concepts, and historical context. They're developing relationships further outside of their family bubble and are exposed to a plethora of information. So we have to be careful to check in and continue to provide guidance and support to help them recognize and counter pervasive bias and discrimination, especially when it seems counter to logical and moral thought. As children become teens, adults transition into the role of the facilitator, allowing teens to freely explore their ideas and emotions. While it is still appropriate for parents to plan experiences and share cultural knowledge, the teenage years are also a time to facilitate critical and interrogations about race and social location. Adolescents are rapidly gaining greater flexibility with which to understand more complex and abstract ideas. And they have widening social networks and experiences that may include more diverse people, or in some cases, less diversity, which makes it even more important to engage in these ongoing conversations. Parents should help adolescents think about how to respond in hypothetical scenarios, how to avoid potential dangerous and discriminatory situations, how to react when faced with or are privy to racism, discrimination, or bias. With adolescents, it's important to foster a safe space that allows them to communicate openly and honestly. We should continue to define terms and concepts and provide contextual understanding, sharing historical perspectives to help them process the world around them and develop their own perspectives. Parents should encourage adolescents to share their perspective and ask open-ended questions to help them process their thoughts and integrate previous teachings and exposure. Parents should provide supportive and loving responses that validate the adolescent's feelings while maintaining a judgment-free atmosphere. When adults disagree or want to provide a counter perspective, they should do so without shaming or negating the adolescent's thoughts or feelings. As children age, our conversations build on previous knowledge and experiences. We continue to reinforce our values and we begin talking about more complex and abstract ideas about race and its impact on the lived experiences of people. As children age, we continue to give them opportunities to share their thoughts, help them process their observations, and give them the safe space to ask the tough questions. As parents, we want to facilitate their learning, share our beliefs and values, and allow them to grow into their understanding at their own pace. As Dr. Roy previously explained, we must be brave. Talking to children about race requires that we create brave spaces for these discussions to unfurl. As you begin to engage in more conversations and your children come to you with questions, remember to first breathe. Take the time and reflect. Take the time that you need so that you're prepared to respond instead of reacting to that information. Acknowledge and validate their experiences and feelings, and empathize with them and yourself. This is a difficult process. It takes bravery and courage to talk honestly and openly about race. Within these brave spaces, you will find the courage to push past the discomfort and have meaningful conversations with your children. As you reflect and prepare for these conversations, you may want to review resources that will help you navigate your own thoughts and interrogate your beliefs and values. These are just a few resources listed here. A Google search, will provide a plethora of resources for you. But it's important to start slow. This is a journey, not a sprint to the finish line. A video that I really like and I use in a lot of my classes, and I know that Dr. Roy does as well. The Power of an Illusion is a 3-part documentary that investigates the idea of race in society, science, and history. White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, is a book about race in society, about race relations in the US context. And then there is a blog, Raising Race Conscious Children, which is a resource for talking about race with young children. And then there is a podcast that's really popular right now called Code Switch. It's an NPR published podcast, and it's #1 on iTunes. So it's very, very popular right now. So I'd like to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Nelson Mandela in his inauguration speech in 1994. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. I appreciate your time and your attention today, and I wish you well.